What do you make for the unicorn-obsessed, dress-wearing, only little girl who dreams of being a princess? You make her Talulah by Violet Filled Threads. I will link them down below so that you can check them out for yourself. The first thing I did was I cut out all my pattern pieces. I cut out one bodice front on the fold, one bodice back on the fold, two sleeves cut on the fold, four sleeve ruffles, these are just some stretchy strips, and then two neck bindings, one for the back and one for the front. The back neck binding is slightly shorter than the front neck binding. And finally, two skirt pieces, both cut on the fold. When you are working with knits, such as this, make sure you choose the right stitch length. The type of stitch I like to use is the lightning bolt stitch or the stretch stitch. First, you're going to line up your shoulder seams and stitch those together. I didn't use pins in this particular part of the project because the seam is so short, I didn't feel like that was necessary. Next, I sewed both side seams. Again, the seam was so short, I did not use pins. Now for the neck binding. Before you start this, make sure that your fabric is nice and flat. I took my iron and then folded both pieces in half lengthwise. Made sure it used a nice good crease. Then I opened up both sides and folded them inward so that they met that center crease, and then ironed this flat. Working with knits is a little bit of a struggle. Once this was ironed, more or less, I folded it in half once again and made a good crease. This crease is going to be on the outside of your garment, and I wanted to make sure that it was very easily seen when I was sewing it to make it a little easier. Next, I sewed the sides of the neckband together. I did this to both sides. Next, it was time to find the center of these bands. To do this, I put the seams that I just created touching, and then just finger pressed the edge so that I could sit a pin into this finger pressed part. I did this both to the front and to the back. I also went ahead and marked the back neckband with a safety pin so that I wouldn't get confused. Now it's time to pin this to the bodice. I found the center front pin, and then I found the center front of the bodice, and I pinned it on. I did the same for the center back. Then you want to line up the shoulder seams. When you're making a neck binding or a neckband for knit fabric, it is important to remember that the neck binding and neckband is usually slightly shorter than the actual bodice. So you'll have to stretch the neckband slightly when you're sewing it on. This gives it a good, nice, clean look. I placed just a few pins throughout attaching the neckband. This just helps to keep the knit fabric from sliding around as you stitch it. I honestly didn't add enough pins as I did this and ended up having to go back and do this whole process again, and I actually used clips. I next brought the whole thing over to my machine and stitched the neckband on using the stretch stitch. As you can see, I did not use enough pins, and so therefore I kept having to slide it back over and fiddle with it a little bit. Now it's time to continue on with the neckband. You need to fold the raw edge so that it meets the other raw edge, and then fold again so that the fold of the neckband covers those stitches, as you can see here. It is my advice to you that you pin or clip the heck out of this. The more pins, the more clips, the better, because it will slide around. Again, I had issues with this and I am not showing it, but I had to do it all over again. So don't be like me. Pin, clip, pin, 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 clip, clip, clip. After what seemed like 2 eternities, the neckband was finally stitched on and I was able to move on to those sleeves. So I used the rolled hem foot on my sewing machine and put a small rolled hem on the edge of each sleeve ruffle. I did this to both sides. When you're using a rolled hem foot for the first time, it's a little difficult and takes some time to get used to, but I really like the look of it once. You're going to run some gathering stitches along your ruffle. Normally I put 2 gathering stitches when I'm gathering a piece of fabric, but since these ruffles were so narrow, I just did 1 row of gathering stitches. Then once those stitches were put into place, I just went went over to my ruffle, grabbed a hold of those threads, and then pulled them down until they were about the size that I felt were going to fit onto my sleeve. Next, I got my sleeve, and I just took the ruffle and made sure that it was the right length. It should go from raw edge to raw edge, and the bottom of the ruffle should meet up with the bottom edge of the sleeve. Now off camera, I did take my sleeve and I put it through my serger at the end just so that edge was finished. It's not really necessary to finish off knit edges because they don't fray, but I just wanted to give it more of a professional look. Then I stitched it on with that stretch stitch. Once I had the first ruffle on, I just lined up the second ruffle against the first ruffle on the bottom and stitched that on in the exact same way. Then I put my sleeves together, right sides touching, and stitch up that side seam, and then ran it through my serger just to finish it off. Make sure and encase your ruffles and they're going in the right direction when you do this. Next, I'm inserting the sleeve inside of the bodice. What I forgot to film is that you need to put 2 rows of gathering stitches along the top of your sleeve. I like to do this before I stitch the sleeves together to try and reduce the amount that I'm having to sew in a tube. And so I did this before I stitched it together and serged it. Now I'm just placing it inside of the bodice, the arm side, and I'm just matching up the top of the sleeve to that top shoulder seam and the bottom of the sleeve to the underarm seam. I just pin it into place and then pull the gathering threads to make sure it fits. Then I took it over to my machine and just stitched it together. I did this to both sleeves. Next it's time to work on the skirt. Before I put in the gathering stitches, I stitched down the side seams of both skirts, attaching the front skirt and the back skirt together. Now I am sewing 2 rows of long gathering stitches. These are just the longest stitches that you have on your machine.
Once these were sewn, I pulled a gathering thread similar to that I did on the sleeve, and I clipped them to the skirt. I like to sew my skirt with the gathers up so that I can try and adjust the gathers as I go. This helps me to make sure that they stay straight and that they look nice. Once I had the skirt attached, I just took my skirt over to my serger and did a narrow rolled hem at the bottom to encase that end to give it a more polished look. Again, you can just leave it unhemmed if you want to. And she's done. I'm pretty happy with how everything turned out. There were little problems with the neckline, but I have some ideas of how to fix that. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.